let's kick things off with what the RBNZ has been doing and what you're doing at the moment to support their moves.
Yeah, well, from our perspective, obviously monetary and fiscal policy do need to work together. That's what happened through the pandemic. And now as we come through the emergency stage of it, our spending is becoming much more targeted. We're looking to get ourselves back to a level of government spending as a percentage of GDP around the 30% level, which is where New Zealand historically has been. We recognise that having done such a big fiscal contribution to keeping New Zealanders healthy, keeping New Zealanders in work, our job now is to get a bit of fiscal stabilisation going alongside continuing to invest in those core public services that we all need.
The RBNZ continues to be quite hawkish, Prime Minister. I just wonder, Minister, I should say, do you think New Zealand can avoid entering into a recession next year?
Look, a lot of commentators in New Zealand still see some real resilience and strength in our economy. Our exports are holding up particularly well. The kinds of things New Zealand exports to the world people want. Our tourism is starting to come back here, and it's going to be a challenging year, no doubt, with the global slowdown, but a lot of economists can still see that resilience. The Reserve Bank's got a job to do here in New Zealand. Inflation is well outside of the target band of 1 to 3%. But I think we can keep a balance going through into next year and avoid that. But obviously, you know, what happens in the rest of the world has a big impact on an open trading nation like New Zealand.
Well, Minister, it's that same resilience that the Reserve Bank has pointed to for the need for higher rates. Let me ask you directly, do you think the economy needs a recession, even a mild one?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously we've seen a significant amount of stimulus in the economy. Demand has held up. Supply has not been able to meet demand, and as we know, that's what causes those inflationary pressures. Most economists recognise that there will be some effect from that, and that we will see, you know, less of that demand and some slowdown. But that doesn't need to mean a recession by any means, in my view. I think there's a balance to be struck here. As I said, from a government perspective, we've removed the emergency measures that we put in place through COVID to support people. We're bringing ourselves back to a level of spending that's around the long-term average. So I think we're doing what we can to make sure we find that balance. But as I say, the Reserve Bank's got its job to do. It will do that, and you know that will have the impacts that we would expect to see when you see interest rates increasing. But I've still got a lot of confidence in the long-term resilience of the New Zealand economy.
Well, you know, one of the things that's been pointed out is this labour shortage you have, and that's partly responsible for this big move up we've seen in wages. How are you going to address that? It's quite important, really, because it makes the central bank's job that much harder.
Yeah, look, that's been the #1 challenge for New Zealand. We obviously closed our borders as part of our COVID response. That was something we needed to do from a health perspective, and it worked. But now we're in a new phase, and so we've undertaken what we're calling an immigration rebalance. We're starting to see that take effect. We've got a large number of people who come here for working holidays, who fill our tourism and our hospitality businesses. We've granted over 30,000 of those visas recently. Our new accredited employer scheme makes it much easier for people to bring the labour in that they need, and that is now starting to happen. And across a range of industries and sectors, we are seeing people coming in. It will take a bit of time because the whole world is competing for that talent at the moment, but over the course of the rest of this year and into next year, we will see immigration come back, and I think that will start to ease some of those labour shortages. But it's no doubt it's the #1 issue in the New Zealand economy, and talking to many of my ministerial counterparts around the world, it's the #1 issue for them too.
And yeah, now that the pandemic is basically over, you know, are you concerned about a potential exodus of these skilled workers moving to other economies with higher wages?
Well, look, New Zealanders have always gone overseas. We talk about the OE, the overseas experience in New Zealand, and certainly there will be people who've wanted to do that for the last couple of years who haven't been able to. So we are seeing some of that. But New Zealand is still a very attractive destination for people to come to and live and make their lives. And we're out there in the world trying to get people to come in sectors as diverse as the health sector, through to construction, through to IT. And we are seeing good levels of interest. But New Zealanders are people who travel a lot. They generally do come back eventually, which is a good thing. But right now, we've got to get that balance right. It is hard when every other country in the world is also seeking that labour force. But it's a great place to come and live here in New Zealand, and we certainly encourage people to take the opportunities up that are here.
The current projection, and we're talking finances now, is you will return to surplus 2025. Based on the information that's come through recently, do you have confidence you'll be able to return to surplus before that projection of 2025?
Yeah, so obviously our next set of forecasts come in December, and so we'll wait to see those as to where that ends up. The 2024-25 financial year is the one that we've set ourselves to get back into surplus. The pathway we've got around expenditure, around what we expect in terms of revenue, will see us get there. I think given the global conditions that there are at the moment, doing that any quicker feels unlikely, given the global slowdown, but we're still targeting that 24-25 year. From our perspective, that would be 5 years after the pandemic really began. And if we compare that to the GFC, it took New Zealand 6 years to get back into surplus after the GFC. So, we're feeling confident that that's a year we can target. But the global economy is going to have a big impact on whether we reach that or not.
All right. I just want to get your comments here on the currency, and obviously this indirectly affects what you do, and a lot of the economists that we speak to, not just on New Zealand, point to weak currencies as exacerbating things that would normally be things like trade surplus and current account surplus. In your case, how are you viewing the weakness we are seeing in the Kiwi dollar against the backdrop of really when it shouldn't be happening because the RBNZ's raising rates?
Yeah, look, we're not alone in that, are we? I mean, most currencies in the world are affected when people come back to the US dollar, and that's what you're seeing play out for New Zealand. We have a floating currency. The government does not control what happens there directly. What we can do is continue to support those in the economy who are affected by those significant shifts. From an export point of view, can be very helpful for some of our exporters. When we're talking about imports and coming into New Zealand, we just need to make sure the supply chain stays open. We need to make sure we support those inside our economy with low and middle incomes who might be affected by that. But in terms of where the dollar is, I mean, I think if you look around the world, we're similar. Unless you're directly pegged to the US dollar, you're going to be affected in this way. Long term, when you look over the big trend for the New Zealand dollar, there is, stability there. People can see that we've got an economy that's well-based, that's resilient. We've got good public management here in New Zealand that's stable and sound. And so over the long term, I'm not too worried about it. Obviously, in the short term, we've got that volatility as people head back to the US dollar. We're definitely not alone in that.
What do you see as the biggest risk then for the economic outlook then, Minister? Is it more on higher interest rates from the RBNZ or this global slowdown?
Look, I think it is the global conditions. New Zealand is a small, open trading economy. We rely on those exports that we send out to the rest of the world. We need the markets that we're in, like of China, the US, Europe, to be strong. And so that will have an impact on us, and that's an issue that we can't entirely control, but we're really focused on a strategy of diversification, of adding value to the exports that we create, looking for those new markets. We've signed free trade deals with the UK and the EU recently, and we want to keep pushing into that area. Domestically, the big issue is labour supply, and obviously I've told you what we're doing about that. That's a slow burn to get that right, and it is causing a lot of stress for businesses, but we will get there. So there are two of the big dynamics in the economy.
How about your cost of borrowing? That's gone up 4 times on the 2-year. That's gone up twice on your 10-year debts. Has that affected how you plan in terms of the supply that you're going to put to this market, how you're raising money, and how you're spending that money too?
Yeah, look, we do keep an eye on that, obviously. On a historical basis, the cost of borrowing in New Zealand is still relatively low. And given the amount of money that we have had to borrow in order to get ourselves through COVID, you know, I'm comfortable with where we are. The ratings agencies are comfortable with us. We've had ratings upgrades and stable readings as well. And so we keep an eye on that, but this is the level of debt that we needed to get ourselves through the pandemic. And as I say, looking into the future, we want to be seeing that come down. But we're comfortable. New Zealand has one of the lowest levels of public debt in the OECD, and so I think we're pretty well positioned to deal with the situation we're in now.
Minister, you're saying that labour shortages were the biggest issue facing the country. I mean, I beg to differ. If you put your other portfolio hat on as Minister of Sport, surely the performance of the All Blacks, apart from, of course, the recent wins against the Wallabies, that's the biggest issue, isn't it?
Oh, look, you know, it's certainly a political issue in New Zealand, I can tell you that. But no, they came right towards the end of the season there, and we're about to host the Women's Rugby World Cup here in New Zealand, and that's going to be a bit of a contest, I think, with the England and with France as well. So, no, don't you worry. Come Rugby World Cup 2023, the All Blacks will be right there.
Let's hope not.
Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much. Minister, thank you so much for that. And I just, based on how your smile and how you perked up in that last answer, I think we know where to pick up next time. We've already spent most of that conversation next. Do have a great weekend ahead.